I just finished up installing a harmonic balancer in this 2007 LS2 powered C6 Corvette, and I'm very familiar with what these cars look like from underneath because, as many of you know, I also own a 2006 LS2 powered C6 Corvette. And as each of these cars were delivered from the factory, mechanically at least, they were virtually identical, with the keyword being virtually. While I was working on this C6, several things jumped out at me, and that's because this C6 has the Z51 package and my C6 doesn't. If you weren't aware, the Z51 package was an option which included several different additional performance parts, with the goal by Chevrolet of making the C6 handle better at things like autocross and road racing. And it also made the C6 handle the heat that's generated from these activities much better than the standard base C6. So being as how we have this Z51 equipped C6 in the shop today, it only makes sense to compare the base parts that are on my C6 with the Z51 parts that are on this C6 in detail.
Toys for life.
Let's start out with the wheels, tires, and brakes, and here's the front. The rims are the same on the base car and the Z51 car, but the Z51 package got the Eagle F1 EMT tires as opposed to different tires that were on the base car. Now, these are probably original or close to original, and they're pretty old, but that was a difference back in the day. Now let's take a look at the brakes, and you can see we've got drilled rotors, but they're also bigger than the stock rotors, so that's an improvement. And the calipers offered on the Z51 are physically identical to the base brakes on the C6, but the bracket moves them out a little bit to make room for the larger rotor. Just how much larger are the Z51 rotors? I just so happen to have a used one that we can compare side by side with the base rotor, and as you can see, the Z51 rotor is a little bit larger in front, but its thickness is the same. The larger diameter does make the rotor heavier as well, and that extra mass should make it better at absorbing and dissipating heat while road racing, but the serious road racing guys will tell you that the drilled rotors do have a tendency to crack when they get super hot, and so while they do look considerably better than the base rotors in my opinion, they may not be the best rotors to use for road racing and serious track use. Let's take a look at the back. Kind of the same situation back here. Again, we've got the Eagle F1 supercar tires, and we have bigger rotors, which actually look quite a bit better on the Z51 C6 because they fill up the gap between the rotor and the rim much better. But once again, the calipers are identical to the calipers on the base C6. In the back, the rotor size is even more obvious when we look at the two side by side, and many believe Chevrolet did this mainly for looks because owners thought the base brake rotors looked kind of puny, and they do. And the only thing different here on the front that you'd really be able to see from the wheel well would be the shocks. I don't think there's a physical difference so much, but they are tuned differently for more performance handling, and they probably provide a little bit of a rougher ride that's typically better for autocross and road racing. On second thought, it does look like the base shocks do have smaller diameter tubes, which makes sense as I know the C6 Z06 shocks are quite a bit larger as well, and they are definitely quite a bit firmer. And here are the rear Z51 shocks, which again are clearly bigger than the rear shocks on the base suspension. That having been said, the shocks on my base suspension C6 are getting a little bit weak due to age and miles, and so I may have to install a set of C6 Z06 shocks on the C6. I do have a set on my C5. They've been on there for a few years and I'm more than happy with them. Or perhaps this time I'll go with a set of aftermarket Bilstein shocks, which are also very highly regarded. Now, let's go underneath. Once we get underneath the Z51 equipped C6, the first thing that really jumps out at me is the size of this front anti-sway bar. It is significantly larger than the one on the base C6. And let's see if we can measure it. This will just be at one spot here. It's right around 31 millimeters. And that's the front sway bar. And that compares to about 25.5 millimeters on my base suspension C6's front sway bar. Let's go to the back and measure that one and take a look. And this one is noticeably bigger as well. The one on my C6 looks kind of puny. And the measurement is about 25.5 millimeters. And here underneath my base suspension C6, the rear sway bar is significantly smaller at about 17.5 millimeters. Interesting, here's the tag that's on the Z51 rear sway bar. And let's see if there's a similar part number in the front. I'm not sure that there is, but we'll take a peek. And no, there's not. It somehow has disappeared about 18 years after production. Other than that, the A-arms, front and rear, are the same. The anti-sway bar end links are the same. But there's also another big difference, and that is this rear composite leaf spring. Significantly thicker on the Z51 equipped car. I'm going to take two measurements, one in the middle and one kind of here. You can see it tapers, but kind of in the middle over here. Let's take a look. In the middle, it's about 23.7 millimeters. And then kind of in the middle of the A-arm area here, and this, it tapers, so this is going to be a little subjective and iffy. About 30 millimeters. That's in the rear. Back underneath my car, the rear composite spring, about 19.5 in the middle. And let's move out to halfway up the A-arm, 27.5. Now let's go back to the front and measure the front composite leaf spring. See if we can tell any differences. Here, kind of in the A-arm area, kind of in the middle. Again, this is quick and dirty, 21.2 millimeters. And in the middle area here, about 18.66 millimeters. This is the best measurement that I'm going to get. And under the front of my C6, in the middle of the spring area, about 18.3 to 18.5. And then in the general A-arm area, about 21.6 millimeters. While I was in the back, I noticed something that really stood out to me. Let's go take a look. I noticed some extra lines coming off of the T56 six-speed manual transmission, one on the driver's side and one on the passenger side. And I wasn't aware. I knew the C6 Z06 with the TR6060 manual transmission had a transmission cooler, but I wasn't aware that the T56 came with such an option. I don't think the C5 Z06s did. I might be wrong about that, but it's the first time I've seen one in person on the T56. Here's that exact same view underneath my C6 without Z51, and as you can see, there are no transmission cooler lines anywhere to be found. And I know those are transmission cooler lines because they go all the way up to the front. They come out here, go alongside the block, and they go over here to the radiator to get some additional cooling. It also helps to heat it up faster to operating temperature, but ultimately if the transmission gets too hot, this should cool it down a little bit. And of course, there's another change here which I actually kind of hate, and that is the cooler for the power steering pump. The C5 Z06 has this, and it's an option on the C5s. Obviously this Z51 does, and I hate it because it has a way of kind of cutting up your hands when you're doing harmonic balancers. But it does help keep the power steering cool, especially road racing where you're at very high RPMs and it kind of boils the power steering fluid, and this helps keep it cooler. And under the non-Z51 C6, here's what we've got in place of that hand cutting machine power steering cooler. It's just a loop of tubing, which I suppose dissipates a tiny bit of heat, but clearly not much. Speaking of keeping things cooler, I am on the driver's side underneath the C6, and we've got an extra line here coming out of the radiator tank. And if you track it down, it goes to just above the oil filter. So this has an oil cooler as well inside the radiator. And here is the exact same area on the non-Z51 car, and as you can see, there is no provision in the lower part of the radiator for an oil cooler line. And above the oil filter on the non-Z51 car, there simply is a bypass bolted to where the cooler lines on the Z51 car would be. And so we've got three different ways to keep this car cooler. We've got the oil cooler, we've got the power steering cooler, and we have the manual transmission cooler. And as you may know, every single automatic transmission equipped Corvette has a transmission cooler inside the radiator tanks. I think that's it. I don't see, and I've scanned this car a few times. If I missed anything, leave it in the comments below because I want to know. But I don't think I missed anything. Everything else on this one appears to be stock exhaust. Although somebody had to replace an exhaust bolt at some point for some reason, which is interesting. Working our way to the back. Everything back here looks stock to me. And getting back to the differential, that looks stock as well. And of course, it's a 3:42 ratio.